Hey, Thomas from Field Tennis. The long-awaited tennis serve technique video from top-down view in slow motion is finally here. You will see the flat serve, topspin serve and slice serve in super slow motion. I've also analyzed the flat serve in a bit more detail, pointing out the key technical elements that I find very interesting to observe from this top-down view. And later on you will also find side-by-side comparisons between flat and slice serve and flat and topspin serve. And my question to you, as always, is what do you find very interesting when you're analyzing tennis serve technique from this top-down view? Share your views in the comments below. So what elements of the tennis serve technique can you observe from the top view here in slow motion? I will point out just a few that are really obvious. There are many elements to the serve, but from this top perspective we can look at a few interesting ones. The first one is body rotation. So you can see that in my ready position I am facing forward and this is my body orientation. And when I start the serve and I coil, you can see how much I turn away. So I'm pointing this out because a lot of players, they do start in this position and they just kind of swing the racket back and prepare it here on the right side, and they do not coil the body enough, and then obviously they do not have enough body rotation into the ball. So we will come to the body rotation in a minute when I uncoil into the ball, but for now just try to observe how much I have turned away. So I will be serving down the tee, down the middle, and you can see that at this moment I'm actually turned more than 90 degrees away. So 90 degrees would be somewhere here. And so I am turned more than 90 degrees. So my rotation in the ball is maybe around 110 degrees of body rotation. So this is the first thing to realize, that you have to turn away from the court so that you have a lot of rotation into the ball for power. Now the second thing that is quite interesting to observe from this point of view is the weight transfer and the leg loading. So you can see that at this moment my body weight is forward. You can see that when I start I'm transferring weight back. So the weight was more on the front foot here and then it went on the back foot a bit more. And what a lot of players miss is that the weight transfer immediately starts going forward. So I'm immediately starting to go forward even though I am leaning back a little bit. Now right now I'm in a trophy position. We have a nice side view from the sun, so you can see my trophy position here in the shadow. And so you can see how there is immediate weight transfer forward, and I'm not waiting on my back foot with the weight, which is what a lot of players do, and then they struggle with transferring weight into the serve. So if I go a little bit back and forth, you can see that here is the toss, release of the ball, immediately loading of the legs, and starting to move forward. So you can see how I'm shifting forward immediately after the serve. Now the next thing I want to point out is obviously the loop behind my back and how the racket comes on the other side to accelerate. So you can see from this view that it's much more complex than how players usually visualize the serve. They just put the racket behind the ball and they go forward, right? So it's for an advanced serve, it's much more complex than that. So the racket goes behind the back and it comes around. Now I want to point out here that sometimes the coaches are going to teach you that the racket has to move from left to right. And they're teaching you to do that with the arm. And you have to be careful with that because this is not what we do. We do not do that with the arm. It happens because of the body rotation. So what we do is we rotate the hips and the trunk very strongly and the arm follows. So you can see how the racket follows from this point to this point very fast because I'm rotating very fast. So the way we achieve this very fast racket acceleration through the loop is through very fast body rotation. So I told you before, I turned a lot here away from the court and I rotate a lot with my body towards the ball, and this body rotation and uncoiling helps accelerate the racket. Now one more thing here, at this point you can see that the racket is on the edge. Now you don't have to worry so much about keeping the racket completely on the edge. At this point I would say my racket's maybe 45-degree angled. You can see some of the strings, but when I loop around and I come to this point, you can see that the racket is completely on the edge. Now I want to point out one interesting thing. Now, how long does it take for the racket to align to the contact point? If I put the timer and I hit the ball, you can see that it's about 600ths of a second for the racket to align from this on edge position to the contact. So obviously very short amount of time, and there is no way you can do that consciously. So this has to develop through pronation drills and other drills that help you develop this move. That's why I invite you to check out my free 30-day serve challenge, where we focus exclusively just on these two moves that are critical for serve power. So the throwing and swinging motion and the pronation. I've recorded 10 sessions of 30-minute drills for you to follow along and complete within 30 days. If you complete the challenge with progressively more advanced throwing and pronation drills, you will undoubtedly serve with more effortless power in just 1 month. The link to the free registration is in the description, or just scan the QR code with your phone on the screen. So back to the serve analysis. So now I've hit the ball and you can see how the arm extends towards the target and the pronation continues, and the internal shoulder rotation. So here inside is the internal shoulder rotation that also contributes a lot of power. So the last thing I want to mention, that I also pointed out in some of my slow motion videos, is that there is no wrist snap, right? So the wrist snap is a myth. You can see that the wrist is completely aligned with the forearm, and it's just kind of a visual illusion. So if I use this shadow again here, because we see the racket down, we kind of assume, so in relation to the forearm, we assume that we do that with the wrist, but we don't. We do that with pronation. If we did this with the wrist, there would be like a bulge here. We would have used the wrist, but you can see the wrist is completely flat. So for this comparison between a flat serve and a slice serve, I'm using a different footage of the drone top view, because here the drone was perfectly aligned for both serves, and I can use the overlay feature here in this app. And so if I just zoom in a little bit at first, so on the left side you have a flat serve and on the right side you have a slice serve. So looking like this, you don't really see much of a difference. They look very similar. And the easiest way to check that is that we use the overlay feature. And so now you can see that, the beginning is basically the same. You can see that my body and the racket swing path are completely overlaid. There's very small differences, but you do see a difference in the ball toss, right? So that is basically the only difference. You can see there's minimal difference in the body movement here, in the follow through and so on, just slight difference in the swing path. So if we go here, so this one was a serve down the tee and this one was a serve out wide, even though might look strange to you because I'm swinging that way. But if I go further, you can see that I eventually rotate this way. So I was serving out wide to the deuce side on this side. And so the main difference is just the toss of the ball and slightly angled racket at contact. You can see that here is really a flat racket and here is slightly angled. And that's about it. So when we're talking about serve technique and you wonder if there is any difference in tennis serve technique between a flat and a slice serve, you can see that There's barely no difference in the serve technique, just in the ball toss and how we arrive to the ball with the racket, with a slight angle that usually we cannot even feel, so we just visualize. So let's compare the tennis serve technique of a flat serve with the topspin serve. In both cases, I'm serving down the tee. So on the left side, flat serve, on the right side, kick serve. So right now we're just looking mostly at technique. So if you have a question, is the technique of the serve significantly different between these types of serves? So if we're just looking like this, where the drone was perfectly aligned, then basically we cannot see much. So let's use the overlay feature and see if we notice any significant technical differences in terms of how I execute the serve. You can see that there is just a slight difference in body orientation. So this serve, the first one where I'm angled a bit more, is a topspin serve. And that's because I'm going to swing a little bit more sideways on the ball compared to the flat serve. Now the feeling in the body is more than what we see, so I feel more sideways, but as you will see, the difference is very small. And of course the toss is different, but right now we're looking just at the technique and not at all the differences in tosses. Stay tuned for the next video about that, where I will compare tosses of all types of serves from the drone view. So this is the serve, and you can see just that the ball position at contact is different, the toss was different. So this is a flat serve and this is a topspin serve, so the ball is behind my head. You can see that my body is almost the same, the head is basically in the same spot. There's just like minimal difference in body orientation. So you can see the technique of the serve is basically the same. There is the same unwinding, the same loop and so on, just slightly different swing path. So this is a topspin serve that swings a bit more to the side, and this one was a flat serve. So there is a difference, but very small difference, and eventually you unwind and uncoil in the same position. So again, if your question is, are there any big technical differences between a flat serve and a topspin serve? The answer is no, not really. It's like 95% the same serve. So if you're still with me, I assume you want to learn more about the tennis serve technique. I highly recommend you check out this video on the side. That is the most popular video on my channel about serve technique. And another video I want to recommend for you is below, which is the slice serve in super slow motion in 240 frames per second. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.